Man, the sun's going down quick. Alright. This one's titled The Unseen. It's getting dark. Hey Steve. Love the channel. Keep up the great work. Much appreciated, man. You really do live a fantastic, beautiful place one day, eh? Keeping this as short as I can. I live in England on the south coast. It's a beautiful English countryside here, but nowhere vast as British Columbia. To the point. One autumn day a few years past, myself and my partner were walking in a small but ancient untouched wood/forest behind some stables where we looked after horses. As we were walking about 10 minutes into the wood, suddenly, very close behind us, we heard what sounded like a tree falling and crashing to the ground. Smash, crash, through the other trees, and then a loud thump as it hit the floor. Felt the ground shake too, very loud and literally 10 feet away. As we spun around, half expecting to see the bouncing tree hit the ground, to our shock, there was nothing there. Nothing. No fallen tree, not anything. Just forest floor, leaves, nothing else. As we stood looking at the ground and then each other in confusion, shock, then from behind us, again just feet away from us, we heard the sound of very heavy footfall, as though someone very big was running away from us. As I turned, half expecting to see someone playing a trick on us, nothing at all. No one, just empty forest. As we stood and looked, the running footfall ran off up a near tree line and disappeared. It was very heavy footfall. No leaves or anything moving, just the sound of something very big running away from us on 2 feet. To this day, we still have no idea what happened. I still find this shocking and extremely bizarre. Even more so as the wood we were in is only small. It's untouched, ancient woodland, but still very small by any comparison to the great forests you have. We feel something was watching us, and that's all I can say. Very, very strange. Keep up the awesome work, Steve, and thank you. Kind regards, Steve Danks, Sussex, England. Steve, thanks for that. Thanks for sending that in. Now listen, if you have, there's going to be somebody else out there, I'm certain of it, possibly from your neighborhood, that's lived that exact same experience, all right? I'll guarantee you there's other people in North America here that have. We've already heard from many of them. And so if you are one of those people from Sussex and you have seen something or heard something similar, email us in, all right? And keep that ball rolling. Steve, thanks for coming forward with that, all right? Somebody out there is appreciating that big time besides me. All right, this isn't marked as red. I hope it hasn't been. Here we go. I feel like I'm going to be running out of light. Pennsylvania encounter. Hey Steve, my name is Jason Pleasance. Feel free to use my name. You're providing a tremendous service that is much appreciated. I may not agree with all the conclusions that are shared, but that's okay with me. So I'd be a lot better off if people could accept that everybody doesn't have to agree 100%. Working through disagreements is how progress is made. Isn't that the truth? Like I said earlier, we can all take from it what we will or leave it, disagree with it, but the good thing is we're all here together no matter what, right? Hit the nail on the head. We're all here together right here no matter what in the end. This encounter took place in the mid-90s in northwest Pennsylvania, Warren County. Two events that you recently read are close to the same area, one from Jamestown, New York, and one from the same county. Although I've been listening to you for a while, I feel it's now time to share my experience with your audience. For context, I grew up in Houston, Texas. When I was 15 years old, during the summer of '92, my family bought an old farmhouse in rural Pennsylvania. It was an adjustment going from a city of over 3 million to an unincorporated township of less than 600. After realizing there was no pavement for my skateboard, I made friends and took to the country life. Over the years, we would hike the wilderness, primitive camp, and go on several mile hunting trips to the state game lands. Such an amazing time and place. While out in the bush, we've seen and experienced many odd things that we blew up at the time. We've come across trees leaning into each other, forming tall teepee-like structures. Several of them in different spots. My buddy said it was probably caused by the weight of snow load, but nobody looked too convinced. Sometimes the trees were broken and looked intentionally placed. While roaming the forest, it wasn't uncommon for trees to fall. I don't know if it's normal, but in the 3 years I've lived there, I've probably heard 6 trees come down without wind or logging. We would get hit by acorns while hiking, or they would bounce off the tent when camping. Do squirrels throw and drop acorns on people? That's how my friends explained it at the time. I've always been a skeptical person by nature. The use of critical thinking is paramount when evaluating for the truth. Back in my teenage years, I was ready to accept these explanations. They seemed probable, and I was a city kid in the woods. The country boys must know better than me, right? I don't think I've ever evaluated these as a whole and just looked at them individually. This next experience was different. There was no easy explanation, and I had to face the reality that not everything is known. The high school I went to was in a town about 16 miles from our farmhouse. I got good grades in school, so my parents gave me a lot of freedom. I was able to do what I wanted as long as I made it home. It was before cell phones, and not knowing where everyone was at the times was a normal part of life. If I missed a school bus home, it was up to me to get there. Sometimes a friend would give me a ride, other times I walked or would hitchhike with varied success. Walking those country roads past midnight was not uncommon for me. On one trip home when I was 17, I was trekking late at night and was about 3 miles from the house. At this point, I kept hearing something moving in the woods on the west side of the road. At first, I stopped and tried to see what it was. Couldn't see anything. Just regarded the sound and kept on my way. It happened again. It sounded like something shuffling the leaves, and it was keeping pace with me. I was concerned because I hadn't heard that before. I've walked up on a black bear before, and that was damn near silent. After a few more noises, I felt like it was intentionally letting me know it was there. And then wailed at me. I'm getting goosebumps trying to write this part down. The sound was like an infant's wail, not crying or screaming, like the sound of a crying doll would make, wah, wah. But it was one long wah that lasted the whole duration. The pitch sounded like a human baby and started at the same volume as a loud conversation. As the wail went on, it increased in volume and intensity. As you can imagine, this scared the shit out of me. I was a city boy alone in the middle of nowhere with something obviously wailing at me. When it first started, I kind of jumped and let out an involuntary scream of my own. In the split second I realized I was starting to scream, I changed my sound from a scared tone to a pissed off one. I started yelling at whatever was out there. I guess I yelled at it to try to show strength, to let it know I wasn't going to cower. But there was nothing I could do. I had no weapons. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel the heartbeat in my temples. It started to yell before mine, and I ran out of breath before it did. I was running tack and cross country back then. Oh, track. I'm guessing that's track. I was running track and cross country back then and had plenty good lung capacity. When it got quiet again, I stared intently into the woods and tried to make something out of the shadows, but I saw nothing. I wanted to run. I wanted to sprint like hell and put some distance between me and whatever that was. Adrenaline was flowing, and I could feel my breathing quicken and my nerves were on edge. My legs and hands were shaking from the adrenal overload. But I kept my wits about me. I knew running in the presence of predators was a big mistake. I took all the courage I had to turn around and start walking again. I walked in the middle of the road. Even though the sound came from only one side, neither side felt safe. I can't remember if I just walked the rest of the way home or if I eventually caught a ride. All I know for sure is I made it home. I've told this story to many people because I know what I saw and try to be true to myself. I've had mixed reactions, but people who know me know I don't make shit up. When I graduated from high school, I moved out of state because I was not a fan of the winters. My mom lived in the farmhouse for another 15 years before moving back to Texas. She has heard the whining baby in the woods by the old house too. I've scoured the internet looking for that sound from a known animal and haven't found anything close to it. Some stories come close, but it wasn't a screaming lady or a crying baby exactly. No one would think that noise came from a baby. Thanks for providing the outlet to get this out. Hopefully my experience can help give someone solace or peace of mind. Best regards. Well, I hope it does too. Hope it does for you. And if you've been listening for a while, you know that your experience you just had has been experienced by frickin' dozens of people, man. Dozens. And that is enough eyewitness testimony. Should be for anybody. Alright, my encounter, Frank Martindale. Just thought I would send this story again in case you lost it. The first time you had said you lost a few stories, so here's mine again. Tell me what you think. Always could use some advice. Maybe the bright orb is some kind of portal into another world. What do you think? Read the story and give us your thoughts. You can use my name, no prob, Frank Martindale. Okay, Frank, here we go. Title: There ain't no Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan, is there? Or is there? Hello, Steve. Come across your website on YouTube a few months ago. I found it to be very interesting because of some of the things I've seen. No, this is not about Sasquatches, although I thought the name Saskatchewan was suitable anyway. That's just me. It's about 2 UFO encounters I had in Saskatchewan. I lived in a small... Alright, I'll do it. I've said before, there's a shit pile of channels out there who cater to the UFO crowd. I know it can be linked, probably is linked, but I've been trying to keep to the people who have these Sasquatch encounters so that we can bring some sort of comfort to them and help them get on their way with their outdoor passions. What I'm trying to get going here, but I'll read this out. I live in a small hamlet called Northside, north of Prince Albert, about 40 kilometers and 50 kilometers south of the Waskiesiu National Park, just on the edge of the Boreal Forest. So the date's 93, mid-September for me and my buddy decided to go duck hunting. So we go east of the north side about 8 kilometers and head north about 5 kilometers. We come up to a swamp and it looks like a good place to sit and wait for some ducks to show up. So I get out of the truck and my buddy drives down the road about another 5K. So I head into the tall weeds that are growing around the swamp, find a good spot to sit and wait for some ducks to fly in. So after about 10 minutes, a flock of ducks are flying towards me. I'm looking at the ducks. They're about 600 feet away from me. Then out of nowhere, a bright light appears in the sky just behind the ducks. And then this orb of light shoots a beam of light at the ducks and appears to have captured a duck. And then this orb of light shoots straight up into the sky and disappeared just as fast as it appeared. And it had scared the ducks away because now they're flying in a different direction and I don't even get a shot up at these ducks because now they're gone and I'm thinking, what the hell did I just see? So I guess the aliens had some duck for supper that night. After 15 minutes, my buddy shows up and asked him, "Did you see that bright light in the sky?" He said, "No." I said, "Okay, let's get out of here." Also that year, there was a lot of crop circles, and a lot of people had also seen the lights in the sky. Okay, now moving on to my second UFO encounter. Yes, you can use my name, Frank Martindale. Okay, Steve, here we go. My second encounter. The year's 94, mid-September. Yes, about 1 year after my first encounter. So this time I'm north of Lac La Ronge, about 6 to 8 hours north at a place called Wathaman River. I was a bridge builder back then, so we went to a lot of remote places. So after work, we would go fishing after supper. Our camp was about 10 kilometers from the job site on this particular day. No one wanted to go fishing with me, so I jumped in the truck and headed for Wathaman River. So I'm standing on the riverbank. After about 15 minutes, I turn around, and to my amazement, there is this bright white glowing sphere hovering above the trees about 800 feet away and about 200 feet above the trees. This sphere is approximately 50 feet in diameter, and it's just hovering there. So after like 2 minutes, 3 bears come walk out of the bush, 2 cub bears, and a mother bear. So I think to myself, this is getting pretty weird, man. So I grab all my fishing gear, head back to the truck. I get to the truck, and now I'm thinking, who's going to believe me of what I just saw? So I'm looking for a camera in the truck with no luck, of course, and this sphere is still just hovering there. Well, needless to say, I didn't want to become a missing person, and all they find of me is my fishing gear on the riverbank, so I jumped in the truck and headed back to the camp, wishing I had a camera in the truck to take a picture to prove this thing was hovering in the air. I wonder, is it big flying around in them spaceships? Is it Bigfoot flying around in spaceships? I also wonder what they want of me. And that's all I have, Steve. You can use my name, Frank Martodam. Okay, Frank, thanks, man. There's no question about it. There's somebody in the audience that has seen the same thing you have, without a doubt. The UFO thing is way more common than the typical theme that we have going on today on this channel. Way more popular. I've seen them. I said it before, a buddy of mine and I were way up northern British Columbia, top of a mountain, broad daylight, blue bomber sky, and here's this pewter-colored round ball just sitting there in the sky, and I had nothing to gauge the size of it. It looked like it was a long ways away, but not close enough to really make out any other detail, just the fact that it was pewter color, round. And then all we could really do is look at each other and say, well, I guess we saw a UFO, right? What are you going to do now? And then, of course, we made jokes about it coming over and saying hi, which it didn't, thank God. Anyway, thanks for sending it in. And please, you guys, don't start flooding the inbox with UFO stories, all right? I'm trying to keep the theme of what we got going on right now. It's too much as it is, okay? And I have to help my fellow outdoorsmen and women get back out there. Oh wow, this is a lengthy one. I'm going for it, and then that's probably going to be it for now. So we got things to do at home yet. 2 sightings of Bigfoot in 36 years in Missouri. Dear sir, you may use my first name and last name, first initial. Would prefer you not say my full name. Thank you, and I apologize for the length, but over the time span of 36 years, a lot is. I have to get it off my chest. Excuse me, I hope this helps someone like so many of your other stories have helped me. Thank you, and thanks for all you do. I enjoy your videos, thank you for giving people like us a place to talk about them. My story took over 35 years to unfold, and I apologize for the length, but I feel that all the parts of my story are very relevant to the subject of all things Bigfoot. For the longest time, I couldn't decide if I should report this sighting or not. The reason being is I'm the once young 11-year-old boy from the 1985 Class A sighting in Ozark County, Missouri that reported that sighting 20 plus years ago to the BFRO website. Like I said, it was the winter of '85 and I was sitting in the back seat of my aunt and uncle's car, coming home from a community get-together / music party. In the late hours around 11:30 p.m. to 12 a.m., my relatives lived about 2 miles down a country road. Right before the entrance to their driveway was an old dry bed creek that would flood whenever it rained heavy. It was always full of large rocks and always bumpy, as it did not have cement slab to drive over it. Directly to the right of the dry creek was a driveway from an old farmer that was well known in the community and had built the house sometime in the 30s to 40s. It had been abandoned for years, but the house remained in relative good condition. He and a good friend had been in the home earlier that year in the summer. In the living room, there's a very large pile of leaves all piled up in the corner of the room. Me and my friend assumed because the window was broken out, the wind had blown the leaves into the house. We went on about our day with nothing special happening. We'll fast forward to winter. I'm sitting in the back seat with my aunt and uncle's oldest son that's about 5 years old. He sat behind his father and I behind my aunt, and she was holding a newborn son that was born in August. Immediately to the right of the car, as my uncle slowed down to cross the dry creek bed, the old driveway to the old abandoned farmhouse was to our right, just a few feet from the dry creek. As my uncle slowed the car to slow crawl, we see something standing at the edge of the road on the driveway that acts like it wants to cross the road, but almost doesn't as we notice it short step itself, as it decided to cross anyway, as if to say, well, they've already seen me now. It was approximately 8 feet tall, bright red hair, very long arms that looked almost longer than its legs. No hair on the face or on the hands. About 450 to 500 plus pounds. It looked like a very tall basketball player, lanky but stout and fit. As it passed in front of the car, it turned its head as if to nod to us, saying, "Yes, I see you, and you see me. let me cross the road and I'll go on my way, and we leave each other alone. My uncle turned the car's headlights slightly to the left, and we could see it staying to the right of the creek bed. My uncle's yard had been eroded from the flooding, and the yard was probably 6 feet from the creek bed, with a barbed wire fence serving as a boundary. If I were to have tried to climb up into the yard that way, I'd have to have had at least a couple of feet to get a foothold to pull myself up. I know because I tried to climb into that yard that way before. Anyway, we see this Bigfoot in one fail, swoop, jump onto the yard, up and over the fence. In one fail, F-A-I-L, swoop, jump onto the yard and over the fence. It wasn't running, but it wasn't taking a slow stroll either. It walked through the yard, past their house, up the hill in the yard, and went straight to the gate that led out into the pasture, and from what we could see, jumped the gate in one motion and was gone. I was scared to death, to say the least. The only other time I grew concerned was when I was in the woods at my home with my parents. I built some teepees and a log cabin to hang out in, as the woods was my playground growing up. One day while I was clearing some brush, I could hear something walking as I was walking. When I stopped, it stopped. I did this action about 3 times, but on the 4th time when I stopped, it kept walking. What caused me to worry was I could hear it getting closer and closer, but I could see nothing. I cleared brush out in those woods from all the trees at height as 6 to 7 foot and cut all the underbrush, rose bushes, etc. So visibility should not have been an issue. And where my little hideouts were built was along an old wood cutting road, which I'd cut clear as well. However, I could never see what was walking closer and faster to me and my cousin. Funny thing is this was the cousin that sat in the back seat with me during my first Bigfoot encounter. I told him to run, and I would stay to fend off whatever was almost upon us. After I saw my younger cousin getting close to the yard, I held my hatchet and began to run for my life. I quickly caught up to my cousin, and without missing a beat, I scooped him up, carrying him the rest of the way. I yelled into the woods, went safely in my yard as if to say to whoever was in the woods trying to scare me and my little cousin that I was not scared. I was going through puberty at this point, so I was full of piss and vinegar, like most country boys of that age. My cousin was my junior by 6.5 years, and I was beginning to work out, hauling hay, mowing yards, and lifting weights, so I was almost certain, had the fight been fair, I could have defended myself and my cousin. I didn't really want to, but I didn't have to. Seeing one Bigfoot is rare, but to have seen 2, I would imagine it's unheard of. Since 1985, I've grown up, been married for 27 plus years, father of 3 sons, now a grandfather. I, with my parents, moved north from Ozark, Colorado, where my first sighting took place, to the adjoining county of Douglas just before my 14th birthday. I returned to Ozark County to begin my family, and about 20 years ago moved back to Douglas County, where I currently reside west of Ava, M.O., Missouri. Sorry, Canadian in me right now, and I'm getting tired. I've been reading my face off here. My wife and I purchased a nice sizable tract of land less than 8/10 of a mile near a small river, large creek with good fishing, so wildlife is abundant. One day, late spring/early summer 2015, my oldest son had just graduated from high school the year prior and was working a day job but still lived with his mother and I along with his 2 younger brothers. However, on this day, it was my son and I at home on that afternoon around 4 to 5 p.m. at the latest. My son unfortunately had become a smoker, and while he's an adult at 19 years of age, we didn't allow him to smoke in the house. I've always had a very close relationship to my sons, and I've always enjoyed long conversations about various things. As we were talking about what I do not remember, my son said he was going to smoke. I stood up and walked with him as he opened the front door, venting tobacco smoke. We were both positioned to see straight out across the yard toward a small dry branch at the edge of my yard. A few years back, a female black bear with 2 cubs less than a quarter mile from our house had been seen in a tree in the parking lot of an old abandoned church with several big oak trees. We've been on the lookout for possible black bear sightings as they are still somewhat rare, but hadn't seen one, or at least that's what we initially thought. My son opened the door and we both saw almost instantaneously a black figure standing on two legs looking straight at the house. Just as we saw it, it saw us and squatted in a downward movement, still on two legs. My son said, "Dad, is that a bear?" When he said that, the black animal turned, still on two legs, and ran in a southwesterly direction from our house. I remember thinking it should go down on all fours, as I was thinking black bear as well, but it never did, as long as we could see it. My son, almost in shock, said, "Dad, was that what I think it was?" I said I thought black bear too at first, but when it ran away, it never went to four legs. I pointed out that it stayed upright and ran away on two legs. My son said that he noticed it never went to all fours as well, and stated rhetorically, "Bears don't run on two legs, do they?" I told him no, they don't. He then looks at me with bewilderment, and I could see he was coming to the same conclusion as was I. We had just seen a black-haired Bigfoot. It looked approximately 6 feet tall and maybe 400 plus pounds. We talked amongst ourselves for a bit on what we'd just seen and how we couldn't believe what had just happened. I told my wife what her son and I had seen that day. The next day I decided to walk out to where it was, standing, to look for tracks or sign. Stepping down into a little dry branch, I could see a smeared footprint in the very damp, almost wet soil, then turned where it appeared to be seeing it. Then turned where it had appeared to be seeing it, had a clear view of our home based upon where it had stood when I saw it. There was a perfect little rectangular space in which you could view my home unobstructed. I saw a green branch that had been pinched cleanly off from an overhanging branch and laid it perfectly on the branch below. I placed the branch where it was clearly connected to the tree it had grown from. It was the one branch that would have affected a perfect view of our home. After several months without further incident, I received a phone call from my cousin that lived approximately 6 miles due west of us. Our highway is a small 2-lane road that reads pavement ends, and it turns into gravel road. If you travel the road all the way, it takes you to a similar highway. My cousin lived southwest of the intersection of said gravel road and small 2-lane highway. Strangely enough, my cousin I was talking with was in the car back in '85 during my first encounter with the Bigfoot. He sent me some pictures on his cell phone. He raised fighting chickens and had a Great Pyrenees dog to protect them from predators. It had just snowed several inches, approximately 8 to 10 inches, through the night. My cousin went outside to feed and water his chickens, but as he walked closer to where his roosters were staked to the ground, he saw a leg attached to the lead rope but no rooster. As he looked further, some had been ripped out of the ground, which were staked with concrete, but pulled freely and thrown out into the pasture that was around his yard. He was very puzzled, to say the least. He then went to the chicken coop to feed and water his hens. Upon entering the coop, he looked upon the macabre scene. All his hens had been savagely killed. None of them had been eaten, only killed, torn to pieces, some ripped in half, but all were dead. As he left the coop, he called for his dog, but to no avail. He then looked for his dog, a Great Pyrenees, and found her dead. He went back inside, called the Missouri Department of Conservation. Before the agent arrived, he went back outside, and there he saw prints as if someone was walking barefoot in the snow across his yard by the dead chickens, only to cross the fence, and then said the tracks just disappeared. Upon the conservation agent's arrival, they began to discuss what could have killed his flock of birds. The agent said it appeared as if this dog had been grabbed by her tail or back legs and swung back and forth on the ground like a rag doll, completely breaking and smashing almost every bone in the dog's body. The agent placed trail cameras in an attempt to catch what possibly was responsible for the death of my cousin's entire flock of chickens and his dog. After 2 weeks, the cameras failed to capture anything that could have possibly done the deed. He told my cousin that the only thing he could think of that made said tracks was a large primate or a person with extremely large feet, but couldn't reconcile why someone would do it barefoot. He also said there was another explanation, but he couldn't say that was what it was, as it has not been proven to exist by science. Bigfoot. What I find to be most curious is when I had my first sighting back in '85, I was with my aunt, uncle, and their oldest son that was sitting in the back with me. My aunt was in the front holding the newborn 3 to 4 months old son. The baby is the cousin referred to in my account of said events, now a grown man. Fast forward 2015-16, then approximately 2 months later, upon returning home, approximately 9:30-10 p.m., my wife and I turned off the vehicle and exited the truck. Almost instantly, after shutting the doors, we heard a loud call coming from the woods, from something I've never heard in the Missouri woods before. My wife asked me immediately, what was that? I simply told her, did you hear that? You know what it was. She ran into the house. A couple months passed, and before going to bed, my wife went outside to check on the chickens and make sure they were all in the coop. When she turned the doorknob and opened the door, she witnessed the same macabre scene my cousin had experienced months earlier. She came back into the house and said, "Dear, I don't know how to say this, but all the chickens are dead." Of course, my response was, "What?" I immediately put on my shoes, grabbed a flashlight, my sidearm, and went outside to investigate for myself. I turned the knob to the door on the coop, opening the door, and all my chickens were indeed dead, ripped to pieces, ripped in half, a horrible death for all my birds. However, not one bird had been eaten, just as the event to my cousin's home. Any typical known predator here in Missouri would have at least eaten some or a great portion of the dead birds. I then asked if the door had been closed properly. My wife said yes. I had to turn the knob to open the door. I did an inspection of the coop and running area for holes in the wire, or if the holes dug underneath by a predator to gain entry into the coop. I found nothing. Two things struck me about the incident. One was whatever killed my chickens could open the door by default had to have opposable thumbs, so that ruled out our natural predators in my mind. Number two, second, was where I had put the recently purchased pre-assembled chicken coop. I had the delivery man place it at the edge of my yard, exactly where I and my eldest son had seen what I believed to be a juvenile 6-foot-tall, solid black Bigfoot looking directly at my house. Then lastly, about 1 month later, we let our female English bulldog outside use the restroom. I heard her growling and barking at something which was uncommon for her. She was a very gentle-natured dog, and when she barked at something outside, it usually meant there was indeed something outside in the yard. However, all at once she fell silent. My wife went to the door to let her back in. She didn't come back to the porch despite repeated calls for her. Still no dog. Then my wife saw her through the ambient light from the lights on said porch in the driveway. She wasn't moving. Put on my shoes, grabbed my flashlight, sidearm, went to investigate. My 2-year-old healthy English bulldog lay dead in the driveway. As I was preparing to bury her, I looked at her, could see a massive swollen area on the left side of her head, upon where it looked as if she had received a blow so hard in the head it killed her almost instantly. Where the suspected blow had taken place, it had swollen and began to turn dark shades of purple. From feeling my dog's face, it was pliable, feeling as if her bones on that side of her skull had been broken. She had no other marks on the rest of her body. I've had chickens since, and until recently, no mass killings by predators until just a week ago. As for dogs that I allow to spend any significant time outside, it's not without supervision. 2 sightings of a Bigfoot within 35 years span, according to Bigfoot research and what I've seen on television, podcasts, YouTube, and read in countless eyewitness accounts, etc. It's extremely rare to see a Bigfoot, let alone 2 distinctly different individuals. Is it not? I'd rather have won the lottery twice if I had to pick a rare event to participate in. I've had no further incidents since. Just reading your comments below and watching your videos over the last couple months, I now realize why me and my cousin playing paintball during my high school years would come to haunt me to this very day. We'd put on our safety gear and I'd hit my head on the ductwork in the basement, making the top of my head very sore, and I chose not to wear a hat. My cousin, however, did wear a hat that day as we were walking into the woods to start our game of Capture the Fort. After the game was over, having never actually been together during the match, I saw him wearing the ball cap and aiming at it while he was on his designated territory. Then he makes a break for the fort. He then sees me with the hat on, and he's using it to take aim at me. We meet up and walk the last 50-60 yards out of the woods together, and we stop before leaving the woods. At the pasture edge, we stop together for a drink of water and to rest a moment, as it was summertime and hot, and while I wore protective face gear, I did not wear a hat. However, I take my hat off to wipe the sweat from my forehead, and I look at my forearm to see how hot I truly was. I see my right hand holding the hat. I turn to my cousin. "Dude, what am I doing with your hat?" He looks at me and says, "That's your hat, man." He reaches for his head as if to find his hat. "Wait, I didn't wear a hat today." I told him he'd wore it out there, and I saw him on the other side of the creek wearing it, and it gave his location away. I started shooting paintballs at him because I could see the hat. "Well, yeah, you're right. I was wearing that hat. How'd you get it?" I reminded him about hitting my head on the ductwork in the basement. I wasn't wearing a hat today. He's like, "Man, when I was in the fort, I saw you wearing the hat. The gold on it gave your position away." It's then I remembered he wasn't wearing the hat when he was in the fort/deer hut. We both asked each other, how do we come together without remembering it and switch the hat? My cousin was asking himself, why don't I remember wearing it out here? I didn't know how I'd gotten it since we'd never crossed our prospective paintball boundaries during the match. He came up with the conclusion that we may have had collective amnesia or something, and that's why we didn't remember the switching it. He actually was talking about special forces as he was considering joining the army within the next year and a half after high school. And his talking about guys that get such intense training they could have been in the trees and switched the hat between us. But that theory didn't take long to be shoved aside, as why would highly trained military personnel be in our woods switching our hat back and forth for fun? We didn't even live next to an army base at least 200 miles away. As we pondered how the hat switched heads, we also discovered, due to the fact we would only take so long to play a match, then we were going to town that evening to cruise for the ladies, LOL. But we'd lost, at best guess, about 15 to 20 minutes. So then we thought we had experienced collective amnesia and lost time during the collective event and switched the hat between us. Does any of that story sound logical? No. I've never been able to understand why the hat was clearly visible to each of us at different points within the paintball match, and how we'd lost 15 to 20 minutes of time without any memory of what happened in that time. We walked into the woods wearing the hat. I walked out of the woods wearing the hat, and we both lost... Hey, wait a minute. He walked into the woods wearing the hat. I walked out of the woods wearing the hat. And we both lost 15 to 20 minutes. It never made sense. Probably never will. I never thought UFOs or aliens. I just chalked it up to a very strange but most likely inexplainable event. Just not something we could explain. I'd be open to anyone's suggestions. This particular cousin never had a Bigfoot sighting. I had at that point, but it would be many, many more years before my next sighting. Anyone with thoughts? Your advice or suggestions would be greatly appreciated. Thanks. Alright, you're right, that was a long read. I hope I read it smooth. It's getting dark. And I have zero experience with people losing time. I don't know anything about it. I haven't experienced it myself yet, but I know somebody who might know something about it, and that's Dave Politis. So, I not even know again what he'd have to say about himself, except there is so many people who have reported losing time. And one of the greatest stories that stands out in my mind instantly comes to memory is Edgar's story. That story really jerked me. And he lost a lot of time there, and he had shoes on his different feet, missing underwear, missing socks, or whatever. And his cell phone was one hell of a point in that story that he shared. When he said it was just like leaving your home national airspace and re-entering, although he had literally dozens of countries' texts on his phone welcoming him to their country. What the F, right? Hear that? There's two noises back there. Or maybe it isn't a dog. That wasn't a dog. Anyway, I better get home. We got things to do. More things to do. Did a pile of work in the barn today. And we have to have Christmas this weekend. First one anyway with the kids. Anyway, thanks for sending that in, man. That's a pile of experiences. What a great memory you have. I guarantee you coming forward with your courage gives other people courage too, right? That's the whole point of the game. And I'm going to leave on this note. Everybody, let's bring the handshake back, you guys, all right? It's time to start shaking hands again. And showing your neighbor you're not scared of them. There's something, there's power, there's energy and power that travels through the handshake, all right? Let's get it back. Start shaking hands and get rid of that humiliating fist bump elbow tap. Ugh. Bring back the handshake, you guys, all right? It's time to not be scared anymore.